Namaskar. In this episode of Dil Se, we'll talk about President-elect Trump becoming the 47th President of the United States on January 20th of this year. And what impact will that have on the rest of the world? On China, on India, globally. President-elect Trump has been making many statements which are somewhat intriguing. He says the Panama Canal should be taken back because it's an important route and we built it way back in the early 1900s. He says Canada should become the 51st state of the United States. We should take over Greenland. And he said that if the BRICS countries want to make their currency or evolve a currency which somehow impacts the dollar, then he will impose tariffs on the rest of the world. That has impact on India, it has impact on the rest of the world, it has the impact on the economies of various countries of the world. Of course, the administrator in Panama has said that no, we're not going to allow this to happen. You have free access through the Panama Canal, and that will be provided to anybody who wants it. And Canada has said that, look, I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe tell us the price at which we can buy the United States of America. So all this is going on just before January 20th. What does Trump have in his mind? There must be something that Trump is thinking about, which we need to analyze. Because Trump has been saying throughout his campaign, I want to make America great once again. And he's anti-immigrant. He does not like the United States defending Europe by spending all the money on NATO. He's been saying if the European countries want NATO to continue, they must pay 5% of their GDP and contribute for the defense of Europe. And all this he's been saying. And I think behind this is the belief that China is rising as a global power and needs to somehow do something to make sure that China does not become the sole power in the world, because so far the US has been the number one military power of the world. It's the number one technology power of the world. And slowly China seems to be catching up. So we're going to discuss all these issues with three wonderful, wonderful, extraordinary people with us. Some of them have come to our show before. We have Vivek Kartuji, who is a distinguished Indian diplomat, great experience in international relations. 1975, got into the IFS. He's been in Cairo, Abu Dhabi, Washington, Kuala Lumpur, ambassador in Myanmar, Afghanistan, Thailand, and of course retired in 2011. And every time I open the newspaper, I find a piece written by him, and I love reading it. Thank you very much, Vivekji, for being here. Navtej, an old friend, author, columnist, diplomat, Delhi University BCom, LLB, US Ambassador 2016 onwards, High Commissioner to the UK, Ambassador to Israel 2008 to 2012, spokesperson of the External Affairs Ministry, passion for writing, and the books that you've written, I think I should make a mention of that. Fiction, Crimson Spring on the Jallianwala Bagh tragedy. Literary works include The Exile, We Want Lovers Like That, short story collections, Winter Evenings, my God, and the book of Nanak, Second Thoughts in Indians at Herod's Gate, as well as two translations, Zafarnama and Savage Harvest. Thank you, Navtej, for being here. We have Sujata Mehta, who got into the IFS in 1980, was in Dhaka, was in PMA twice, first during Narasimha Rao's time and then later in New York. JS, Joint Secretary in the PMO, Ambassador to Spain, was between 2011 and 13. You were in the UN Conference on Disarmament, our ambassador and representative of the PMI, and a Sherpa for the BRICS. And now, of course, he just retired as a member of the UPSC. So we have people who know what America is up to and will give us some insights into what's happening with Trump coming to power on January 20th and becoming the 47th president. Vivek, what are your thoughts?
I think you've summed up things very well, Kapil. If one goes by the experience the world had of the first presidency, first term of Trump, then there will be disruption. And his comments and statements by the standards of conventional diplomacy are outrageous. Quite frankly, I can't think of another word. But during his first term, there was a great difference between his statements and what he actually accepted as results. And if some people, one country that I know of a little bit, which got extremely worried by his statements, but then realized that they could ignore many aspects of it, was Pakistan, vis-a-vis Trump's comments on Pakistan in the context of Afghanistan. So we don't know what is the real substance behind these statements? To what extent does he intend to carry them forward? But my first attention would really be on the immediate, the thing which will arise immediately. If you recollect, he has said that if Hamas does not release all the hostages before the 20th, then, to quote him, all hell will break loose. He hasn't defined it. So let's see what he does then. If he does nothing, say with Iran, with Hamas, with the Hezbollah. But my last point I'll make at this stage is that you're absolutely right. In the long term, what Trump or what any American president will have to face is the rise of China. Because as you say, so well put it, China is catching up with them in terms of technology. It's a science power. It's now become a technological power. And I was talking to someone who knows this subject, and he was saying that till now, the Americans believed that in some critical areas, there was a gap of at least a few years in innovation between them and the Chinese. Now,
they've gone ahead.
Many people are uncertain. In some areas, say like quantum computing, there's great fear in America that they are ahead.
Space technology.
And we know that their capacities and tooling are superb. So I think Trump will have to face that reality. And how he manages it will be crucial. And let's bear in mind that after decades, there's been an American president who will wield such enormous power as he would, because not only does he control the presidency, and let's not forget, he has the popular vote too, which he didn't have in his first term. He has the Senate with him, it's Republican, and the House. So with this kind of, and if I may say so, the Supreme Court.
Yes, of course.
So he is master of all his surveillance.
The problem is, and this is what I want to ask you, Navtej, if you look at the global economy today, the BRICS countries contribute 41% of the global economy. The US contributes 29% of the global economy. And now Russia and China are already doing trade in their local currency. Iran has also got into it. And their intent is to somehow weaken the dollar, which will politically weaken the United States of America. And perhaps that's why he's talking about tariffs and things like that. Maybe
thank you very much. I think Vivek has covered a lot of ground, so I won't repeat it. But essentially, I think Trump this time is, Trump unplugged. And whatever, the first time around, he was tentative to begin with. He had his ideas. He didn't know how Washington worked in that sense. He was an outsider. He didn't have all the people in place for months. This time, he is far more prepared. He's got an agenda which he has evolved and developed through the campaign. He's got his priorities, and most important, he's got his people in place already. Well, some of them may not get confirmed, but that's what we have to see. But he's got his people. Mm-hmm. So he ultimately, I think, he has some ideas of how to make America great again. And one of them is, of course, strengthening America's...
he wants manufacturing to come back to America.
Economy. So, but he has some ideas which are debatable. Mm. So, for instance, this whole idea of tariffs, which he believes will have a long-term impact on job creation and bringing back manufacturing to the United States, will have terrible short-term impact on inflation. Absolutely. Not just for the United States, but for a lot of disruption across the world, because there will be counter tariffs, there will be retaliatory tariffs. So I think he has the idea of creating jobs, of manufacturing, make America great again. So he has an old-fashioned economic mindset, right, both in trade and in industrial policy terms. So he is not a globalist by any means. He's also not an isolationist. Of course. If he says he wants to be in Greenland and he wants to be... what he wants is that the world should deal with America, essentially with him, on his terms. Because for him, I'm chary of saying that he has a great strategic vision of how to make America great again. I don't think he has a strategic vision. His priorities are first Donald Trump, and second...
that's somewhat familiar, no?
Absolutely. So he wants that to come into the game. So I'm afraid that many of the actions that he's saying, for instance, on immigration, on tariffs, are being debated today even within his own camp. Yes. That will they really be good for America? So, for instance, the whole H-1B visa.
Now they've taken it back, that decision, I believe.
Yeah, so it's back and forth because Elon Musk himself came on an H-1B visa. So
the American economy can't survive without.
They can't survive without. So that's, so that tussle is still going on. And as Vivek said, we will have to see how much of this is bluff and bluster, how much of this is a initial negotiating position, how much of it is to just scare his adversaries as well as allies. He's done this in the past. So he's doing it, but this time he's doing it, I think, with greater clarity.
Okay, I want to make two comments. One on Panama. On Panama, if you really look at the data, 70% of all ships that pass through Panama are either going to ports in the United States or from the United States.
Well, I'd like to comment on that, because the fact of the matter is that Trump is fundamentally using uncertainty, unpredictability as a tool. So in a sense, he is thrown a whole lot of things out in the expectation that that some of them may stick, some of them may not. The other point about this is that, and he did this in his speech at Mar-a-Lago even last week, that he's looking in terms of early deals. He's, after all, famous for the art of the deal. And he's looking at what of these can actually crystallize in some form that is saleable and which works for him.
Take Zelensky. Now he wants to make sure that war ends.
And West Asia.
And West Asia.
West Asia. So in a sense, Panama Canal is also reflective of that. That you throw out something about the Panama Canal being China at both ends, which the Panamanians have denied. Because they've said that that's not.
The Panamanians have now said that yes, China is there.
They're there, but they're not controlling it.
They're not controlling.
They're not controlling it. He's saying that they control both ends of it. Now, it's easy to say that China at both ends, but that's not factually true. Then Greenland. Now, what exactly he plans to do with Greenland, no one really knows. But yes, there is a history of the US having possibly wanted to buy it in the past, and maybe that's what he's looking at. But it has also, he said that in his first term. But it's also interesting that his son went to visit Greenland just on the day that he talked about it.
My impression is, and I may be wrong, that there are American bases in Greenland.
There are?
One base. There's one military base.
One military base
in
Greenland.
For a
There's
long
enough
while.
good reason behind it.
Yeah, therefore he wants to, and now with space technology, China going slightly ahead of the United States. In other words, they can now send a satellite beyond 20 kilometers, bring it back and breach the 20 kilometers. So you need a defense system. The US needs a defense system which is far more sophisticated than it existed at the time. Therefore, you need a better defense system from Greenland to be able to deal with this challenge, because the attack can come either from the north or from the south. So that's the reason perhaps he has said, I want to be there.
But the issue is whether the US would want to strengthen access to the territory of Greenland for defense purposes, or whether they actually want sovereignty. Now,
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point, if I can come in on this, because Greenland is part of the Arctic.
That's true.
And Arctic has immense strategic value today. I mean, there are 7 Arctic coastline countries,
right.
and if the Americans can extend their presence into Greenland, then strategically speaking, it's tremendous. Also, Greenland has absolutely huge amounts of oil, gas, gold, zinc, nickel, all the stuff that, anybody with Trump's mindset would want to be sitting on.
But the issue is that it's not as though Denmark is a competitor.
So
there's an alliance relationship in any case.
That's the difference. It's not any longer NATO versus Russia. It's within NATO.
So you say that there are defense issues there, and there are economic issues.
There are 3 sets. There are 3 sets of issues. There's strategic issues, both in military terms and in economic terms, because of the huge mineral resources available there, and oil and gas, which, Trump loves oil and gas.
That's right.
So there's nothing better than, drilling for him. So if he's going to drill through Greenland, he can carry on. The other thing is, in military terms, half of the Arctic coastline and the northern sea route, which is opening up because of the warming, belongs to Russia.
That's true.
And he wants a greater presence there. And so there is going to be a military problem there, particularly since NATO has now extended to include Sweden and Finland. So you have a direct line right up to Murmansk of NATO countries. So it is already on a military precipice. If there's an incident, it can go all wrong. The third aspect, which doesn't bother Trump, is the climate aspect. So Greenland is hugely important for climate, and what they do there will not stay in Greenland.
Right.
Because if they do drilling in Greenland, we are, countries, coastal countries and small island countries are going to have major problem because of rising levels. So there's a huge amount. So I don't know if he's thought this through. As somebody wrote recently that he's probably looked only at the Mercator projection of the map, in which the Greenland looks almost the size of Africa. And it isn't that much.
But there's a more fundamental issue involved. At the moment, if you see, the Danes have said that fine, if it push comes to shove, we'll make Greenland independent. At the moment, there is
autonomy.
At
the moment, there is
yes, there is autonomy. We'll make them independent. Greenland has what? Less than 100,000 people, perhaps 57.
Less than 50, I think.
About
100,000.
Now, Greenland, there can be a referendum. They can have a referendum and decide that they want to join the United States, but it can be the other way around. They say we don't want to join. But the impact of all this on the international state system
disruptive
is totally disruptive, because the fundamental, as we all know, with your experience, Kapil, you know this most of all, that the fundamental basis of the international state system is the maintenance of sovereignty of states, that you can't. Now, we all know what Putin's action on Ukraine, how much it has disturbed the international state system totally. After all, it's a P5 country, charged with the maintenance of international peace and security. Now, the United States were to, I'm sorry to use the word, gobble up Greenland, and it will be nothing short of gobbling up.
Yes.
Then how will the international state system cohere? That is my...
But with respect, Vivek, in the past, the United States has not gobbled up anyone, but it's that some of their actions in the past have sort of skated on thin ice in terms of other sovereign entities. But the issue really is that the power of the United States at this point in time is still so overwhelming. And the shadow that the United States casts on the international system is so great that virtually any statement of a president of the United States counts and warrants analysis. You know, we can't just take anything that they say lightly, and that is really what we're...
But not just, yes, it's absolutely, you can't just take over part of another country. Then after that, how are you going to stop Bibi Netanyahu from, tomorrow annexing the West Bank, which you might as well do, or China, or China, you have no moral center left once you have started doing that.
You're absolutely right. It's a free for all.
Then it's a free for all. But given the fact that we are living in a crazy moment, and the limits of acceptance are extremely elastic at the moment. The important point here I see is that he is setting the stage for an intra-NATO conflict. The French and the Germans have already pushed back.
That's right.
And said you can't do this. So there is a pushback to the bully. That's happening here. Even Panama has, as you said, made the statement. Trudeau said that we can exchange parts of Canada for California. So it's not going to be...
There's a pushback. Yeah,
there is a pushback, and it's for a moment it's taking away the attention from a combined NATO standing up against Russia.
But the point is that, and that's why I say the fact that he sort of trades in unpredictability is an important one, because we would have expected that in addition to trying to counter China, he would have been aggressive. But the fact remained that he has invited President Xi to his inauguration. So that is where I guess there's something of a gesture made. And he's looking to see what China comes back with.
I think being a transactional president is going to have a deal with China.
Precisely, and that is where,
as you mentioned, for him the art of the deal
is the important one.
Ultimately, I would not take his line on China as fixed for all time. The minute, if he can get a deal with Xi, because he did make some statements which were disturbing, that between if US and China sit together, we can solve the world's problem. Right. So are you looking at a G2 if he gets a deal? In which case, all bets are off about the Indo-Pacific and the Quad and everything else.
The American economy, just look at the American economy and how difficult it will be for Trump to do this. The American economy is $35 trillion with a debt of $35 trillion, right? The deficit is 8%. You can imagine a deficit of 8% of the American economy. The American economy is pretty weak at this point in time. They may be strong militarily, but the dollar doesn't have the same kind of... people are buying more gold than dollar nowadays, right? So what maneuverability is he going to have in the global space?
He has all the maneuverability he wants, I'll tell you, because the world has so much of stake in the continuance of the American economy. Everyone is so invested, including the Chinese.
That's true.
How much of American paper?
70% of the global stock market of the world is invested in China.
90%
in New York.
So you can imagine that is the luxury they have.
90% of global trade is in US dollars, is denominated in dollars. So the fact...
Yes,
it does.
They control the entire tech.
So the fact is that...
They worry that that's slipping out.
Yeah. It is but the point is, it is a diminished United States
yes,
today.
It is.
It is a diminished in terms of global standing, in terms of reputation. And for that, if we step back over the last 4 years, frankly, Biden, although he's sounding very good in contrast to Trump today, Biden's foreign policy has actually shown up the United States for the kind of double standards,
of course,
that they have stood.
I think, if you permit me to say, we all know the world is full of double standards.
Yes,
and no
yes,
one
yes.
really
That's
bothers
part of
about it.
diplomacy.
That's part of
I
the
think-
game we all
But then they
know.
can't pretend that
Yeah,
they're the
but
guardians
world,
of the international
everyone
order.
pretends they all
The
pretend, so
difference
I
is
don't
that
think
Trump does not say that they are guardians of a moral order or a world order or a liberal
For
order.
that
That's
matter, he's more
basically
upfront about
Yeah,
things.
He's much
He's
more-
honest,
he's straight.
I mean, if he
And
says
the
that-
fact remains that even a diminished America is the one country everyone regards as the most consequential in the world.
Yes, it is.
It is. But
It continues to be.
It does continue to be, but I mean, I tried to sort of get out some data, ferret out some data on this. China's is now getting leadership in manufacturing and also in technology, as you mentioned.
That
right?
is the major one.
They are leaders in manufacturing, they are leaders in high-speed rail, they are leaders in shipbuilding, they are leaders in 5.5 GHz wireless communications, they are leaders in renewable power, they are leaders in fourth-generation nuclear power, they are leaders in quantum technology, they are leaders in biotechnology. America is behind in these areas. And even though America has the money, I'm afraid they just don't have the wherewithal to compete with China in the years to come.
But they have one great asset.
Hmm.
They are pragmatic.
The Chinese,
No,
the Americans.
If they want to suck in the international talent in all these areas,
But that is one reason
that is
why.
what they can do, what the Chinese can't. And we know it for a fact. For example, they have a shortage of engineers. Young Indian engineers in the age group of 30 are being taken to America, are finding, and the Americans are then ensuring that their education is fully complete. So my point is that the American system has understood the gap is widening and is taking action. They might not succeed fully.
Yeah.
Unlike us, if you permit me to say, who are very dogmatic on some issues, the Americans aren't.
I do wonder, though, the fact that the Americans are trying to, or have tried to put in place restrictions on China's access to technology, I think that has probably softened up the Chinese a little bit. The fact remains, to my mind, that if America was to actually cut off that access, China would suffer. And the Americans are aware of that. I mean, that is really what the CHIPS Act did.
Yes, it
Isn't
would
it?
suffer, but to for
What
how
extent?
many years?
China's investing hugely
Yes,
in
how
what
many
they've
years?
been
True.
deprived of,
Yes.
and they're going to catch up on on the chips. They don't want Taiwan to remain predominant anymore in the chips business. So the fact that the Americans have cut off high-end
Access, yeah.
access to high-end chips, I think that has actually gone to China's advantage of investing hugely in that industry. And given Chinese track record, I think they won't take long to catch up.
All right, let's move on to another subject. What effect will the Trump administration have as far as Indo-US relations are concerned? I mean, let me just preface that by saying that I may be wrong, but I've seemed to have got the news that our Prime Minister was not personally invited in the inauguration. There's an invitation extended to the government of India. What does that mean? And is India on the radar as far as the US is concerned at the moment? Or is Trump worried about other things, not so much on India?
To answer your first question, I think the wording of the MEA statement with regard to External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar going for Trump's inauguration would seem to indicate that the government of India's representative was invited. And there was no personal invitation. That is the inference from the wording. But on the second aspect, I think India is on the radar. But at the moment, there are so many irons in the fire for Trump and the Trump administration that I don't know if India is a great priority for them.
Yes, that's what I was asking.
As I was asking.
What do you say?
Frankly, I mean, having lived through the first two terms of Trump in Washington as the ambassador, I think it's not good to be in Trump's radar
Okay.
until things settle down.
Mm.
So even last time in 2017, a lot of world leaders rushed to meet Trump. Even some of them went to New York before he had even moved to Washington, the Japanese, the Koreans. And soon after he was inaugurated, the British, the Germans, uh, each one of them had a problematic visit because he said embarrassing things, he was aggressive, and he was unpredictable. Uh, and honestly speaking, I think we managed to keep our heads down. And the Prime Minister actually only visited in June 2017, by which time there was more stability in the White House and a more understanding of the relationship. And it worked. The first visit worked, and so did the subsequent visits. Frankly, I don't think, I've never heard, this has not been an issue in the past, being invited to the inauguration. So I think even if India is not a priority, I don't think it would be a great advantage to be coming immediately in his eyes in this revenge return to the White House for him to say something which will have important political and image repercussions for India.
It might
I
have
mean,
repercussions here.
Yeah, it might not.
so far in terms of where he's referred to India in terms of tariffs.
That's
He's
correct.
repeated that
Yes,
2 or
yes,
3 times
yes,
in
yes,
the last
yes.
couple of weeks. The other issue where India has figured is apropos immigration.
That's
and
correct.
that's the H-1B visa. And there I think the fact is that people in his own orbit, so to speak, seem to be on India's side, as it were. And
Yes.
that's a positive feature. I don't think that we should allow the relationship is so important, the breadth of the relationship is so important that frankly, I don't think we should judge the relationship or how Trump moves on any 1 or 2 aspects, because then we are setting ourselves up to look at it in negative terms.
No, but I just want to ask the question: is he as invested on the Indo-Pacific? This I'm a little worried about. That given Trump's policies, he wants to be a little more isolationist in this area than to worry about the security of India in this part of the world.
Can I rephrase that?
I may be wrong.
Can I rephrase that?
Yes.
Will he be as invested in the Indo-Pacific, in the Indo-Pacific?
That's correct.
On Quad,
That's right.
as he was in the past, or as Biden?
Exactly.
I think that is the issue that we have.
That's the
to
question
confront.
I'm worried about.
The fact remains that Asia Pacific became Indo-Pacific under Trump.
Yes.
Not under Obama. The fact remains that Quad was revived under Trump.
Right.
So as long as he doesn't get this broad deal with China and doesn't soften up US-China relationships, India will remain an important, in the broad strategic sense, an important partner in the Indo-Pacific, who also has a problem with China, and we have a problem with China. So we are both on the same side.
I would add
There's very broad terms.
I would add a last point, and that is to supplement what you're saying, that his relatively more positive approach to Putin actually also helps us.
Of course. If that
because
works.
the India-Russia relationship may not be as much of a feature for him as it was perhaps for the US under Biden, because they looked at Russia in terms of Ukraine.
Yeah.
But Putin, Russia-India relationship is not as it was at one point in time, and the proximity of Russia and China in a way has impacted our relationship.
But Ukraine was a problem for the Democrats.
That's true.
India's position on Ukraine was a problem. India's relationship with Putin therefore became an issue.
That's true.
And that is less of a problem now.
It seems to me that both my colleagues are saying that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that look, as long as there is some bipartisan support for India, for the Indian relationship in the US, that we are on a good wicket. There's a certain role taking place.
True.
And if we are not in Trump's eyes, this role will continue. And it doesn't require a presidential push that there's an autonomy now and it will go on. If this is, and I respect both of their assessments greatly, so if this is the situation, then I'm not worried. My worry is this: how far will he be willing to go to accommodate China?
That's very
And
fair.
what repercussion will that
That's
have
a fair point.
on us? There's a question mark. in my
If he
mind.
gets a deal,
With
then
China.
we have a problem.
So
Yeah.
that is my worry. So as long as this role continues, I'm okay.
But even the role, Vivek, if I may come in and just nuance what we said earlier, two areas: immigration and trade. We are going to have problems. Immigration, I'm not worried about.
I'm not worried.
Yeah.
I'm
about
not worried about the H1B.
H1B.
H1B, they will sort out. They need our people as much. And frankly, if our people don't go, let them stay at home and do some work here. I honestly feel that there's
H1B they can't do without us.
yeah.
they
So
can't
H1B, I'm not worried about. The problem is going to come with illegal immigrants. We have over 700,000 Indian illegal immigrants. There are 18,000 who have finished all the entire judicial recourse, and they are just waiting to be deported.
Okay.
And if these 18,000 are sent back in the first week of the Trump administration, the India-US relationship will take a hit. If we get this huge amounts of tariffs on us and we are not able to maneuver our way, like last time we took, trade became a big issue, then these are two things for him which are big, and they begin to color the rest of the role.
Right.
The role is there, but they begin to color that, and particularly the media picks up these things, and then that plays into the relationship. So while we may be doing great on critical and emerging technologies, on education, on students, on S&T, and various other things, and continuing our defense relationship. By the way, we will have to continue our defense to
Of
make
course.
him happy.
Of course.
Yeah,
That's
that
beyond a
We
doubt.
have no choice.
yeah, and that kind of investment of buying more and more, that will have to be done. But these two things have the potential in the public eye.
In fact, there's some talk about a deal where they want to sell their new fighters.
Yeah,
Right.
that's been
That's been on for a while, and maybe that may have something to do with the prosecution that's going on.
I think these 18,000, some of them we should be prepared, he'll have to send off. I don't know. On illegal immigrants, you know it better, but my understanding is that there are large segments of the American economy that are dependent on illegal labor, and it's one thing for President-elect or during the campaign to be macho. It's quite another thing when he's in office, and you know that better
Yeah, of course.
as a political than we would. So I don't know how far he'll go on that, quite clear.
And he'll also have to follow a process.
Yes, he'll have to follow a process.
Yeah, he can't just pick them up and send.
Yeah. That's
On
true.
trade, yes, I think we should be a little more concerned. There are certain things that on which he's fixated. Certain items we might not particularly like, to reduce tariffs or allow imports. And I think there we might have to give.
In any case, I think we should, by and large, our policy should be to bring down the tariffs, bring down the import duties.
Our tariffs are very high
It's
compared
very,
to
very high
ASEAN.
compared to
Across the
other
board.
countries, yes.
Across the board.
Therefore, that in any case should be a positive, if you ask me.
But the thing
other
is,
thing
he
is-
wants to see it as an India-US, as a purely bilateral
Yes.
give to him.
So in
That
terms
is
of
something we
trade
do for him.
balance, he thinks in terms of trade balance.
Yeah.
So we have a positive trade
But
balance.
there's one other issue
That is
we
true.
haven't talked about, which we'll have to see how it plays out. It's a sensitive issue. The Pannun issue.
Yeah.
How will that play out? We don't know.
Yes.
There are other indictments.
True.
So we'll have to wait and watch.
I think
Well-
being transactional, he'll use it. for
Well,
the
I
purposes
think
of
we
getting
shouldn't
something.
actually, we shouldn't treat those as the touchstone of the relationship.
shouldn't treat
These
them
should
as
not be allowed, because in the
No,
public
but-
mind, in the press, these acquire a certain profile. And I think to to allow that to happen will actually not
He may
help
use it.
for
I
us.
think what Vivek is
No,
saying is he may use
absolutely.
it.
No, more than that, they will play publicly in India. One
That's
of
what
those
I mean.
indictments will certainly become part of the political
See,
process. They'll
This
figure
many
here.
times, the tail wags the dog. Like in the last tenure, we had this issue of the Harley Davidson,
Yeah,
which came into his head,
That's true.
and it wouldn't go away. And although we produced, this entire script that Harley Davidson was only importing about 30 odd bikes,
That's
which were attracting 100%. But I think we should have been generous and said we'll make it zero on these. We didn't do that, which is we also get into I'll give it to you. So that we didn't do. So unfortunately, the relationship has to be worked by professionals.
True.
And it has to be worked at the sub-presidential level, which it will be done, I'm sure. It'll be done by ambassadors and secretaries and ministers, etc. But it will be done below the presidential level. So like last time, we made huge ingress into the strategic gains, as against loss on the trade and etc. This time again, we should concentrate on what matters to us. And we have.
So what are the key things that matter to us?
I think key things that matter to us is defense, is security, it's China, and it is the innovative, the modernization of India to be able to get access to technologies. For instance, now we are working with them on this Artemis program, which is commercial space.
Right.
We are going to work on the mineral security, which is access to critical minerals. These are things which matter to us, which I don't think, unless Trump is not involved in all this. But you have to play Trump to a level that, all this doesn't get disrupted. So it's a question of feint and, change and deflect and flatter. And, it's a mix of all that. And I think world leaders have learned the game.
On the stage, you are looking at it in terms of conventional diplomacy.
Yeah,
but
works.
Unfortunately, of course it works. I mean, you all have been diplomats.
You
know that. But I'm afraid my own little experience is that when it comes to dealing with the United States, as with other countries, in addition to conventional diplomacy, there's a vast, and I hope not growing, but still vast political aspect.
Yes, of course.
And that is where I would leave it to Kapil.
No, but
That's a
very serious issue.
Yeah.
I didn't want to touch it, but that's a very serious issue. I mean, that's a global issue. It's not limited to Trump.
But
That's a global issue.
We played him politically last time. You saw the huge rallies.
Yes, of course.
He never had 120,000 people in the stadium.
That's right.
Or the rally in Houston.
But if that's the case, then we should have had an invitation. So obviously, there's
big
something.
gestures.
I think we should look forward to the Quad summit
That's
here,
right.
where he's supposed to come.
Yes.
And then
Maybe that will be.
Now tell me, this is maybe. Let me ask one other issue. I want your thoughts on it. On Sullivan's visit, why did Biden send Sullivan at this point in time when on the 20th of January Trump will be president? What was the intent behind it, you think? How does it matter to us?
My experience, of course, I retired 13 years ago, so I'm getting long in the tooth. But in my experience, you never had an outgoing president sending an NSA, or we receiving the NSA of an outgoing president, unless there was a dire emergency.
That's right.
2 weeks before the inauguration of the next. Things have been said, a process has begun. But the processes which have begun can always be interrupted by the new people coming in. So I was very intrigued. But then I also recall that Pompeo had come here in late December 2020, if I'm not mistaken. So, as I said, now there are new diplomatic ways. What has been announced is, of course, lifting of sanctions or process on entities.
But that's been very positive, I think.
Yes,
That's
of
right.
course
The
it is.
outcome of the visit is very positive,
very
insofar as
positive.
that these three entities are being taken
Absolutely,
off
and
the
I see-
list. So it's
and on
a
emerging
huge plus.
technologies.
Yeah. And that I
if
said,
If it
yeah.
goes through, I think it will be
absolutely
great.
wonderful.
And I think possibly we may have, I mean, again, it's guesswork, just reading the statements that have, the readouts that have been put out, I think it's possibly we would have been keen that these are niggling things. Let's get it started by people we know.
Okay.
And although we are getting to know the new NSA, etc., I think they've had a meeting or they're going to have a meeting. So, but let's get it into the process, and it'll be that much more difficult for an incoming person, unless there's a great reason, to push
Get it
it
started,
back.
yes.
Yeah, because this is something which is, which should happen as a consequence
Should
of
have
the
happened because
nuclear deal.
since
Well,
2008,
let's
it hasn't
also
happened.
hope that it's something that the Biden administration wants to leave a positive legacy on all their relationships.
And
I think
particularly
that's right.
technology.
That's right.
No, I think that is welcome.
That's very
That is
good.
very welcome.
And it's a good start.
The only thing is that, as I said, at the time when I was serving, then one was very wary of anything started by an outgoing administration and its impact on the new one. So we refrained. But then there's a new world, and I will bow to.
No,
Well,
but
we're
that-
not exactly new.
You're far
but,
more current, so
no,
you
but-
know
but
more, and
also-
with your experience of the US,
But
you know. And
let's also bear in mind the fact that the incoming NSA is also an important member of the India caucus. So therefore, to that
yes,
extent,
yes.
there's
I
a
think that
certain
would be a
continuity that we can
that would
expect.
be a
So I think this
Isn't
would
it?
have
So
been
there's
that
a
let's
certain-
lock in what we can.
That's right.
And let's push what
That's right.
they are willing to do, which is not likely to be reversed.
That's correct.
So it's probably locking in the gains.
That's right.
We'll end this
The
discussion
legacy.
with a well-do it.
If that is so, then I'm very happy.
I think
Truly.
Let's hope so.
That's
Let's hope so.
I don't see them.
I think there's no
reversing
negative
it.
to this at all.
No,
There's
I don't think so.
Because if they reverse this step, then we are going back 20 years.
It's not
They
going to
won't
happen.
reverse, but I think,
They can
the
let
other
it
way,
lie
but
low.
I'm very happy.
But
That it happened. Yeah.
that it happened is
That's
welcome. And what may or may not happen, we don't know yet. With Trump coming after 20th of January, we'll get an idea as to where we stand within the international fraternity and where Trump stands and what he's likely to do or not to do. Thank you very, very much for being with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.